I think the biggest thing I took for granted before becoming a parent was just how much free time I actually had. Hi everyone, my name is Kayla and welcome back to Kay's Hidden Shelf where we talk about books. In today's video, we're going to be talking about how parenting changed my reading. And for today's video, I know it's going to look a little bit different. I am working on a studio refresh, reorganizing things and trying to set up a different spot to potentially record in two places within the studio, which is exciting. So if you want to stay tuned for that, definitely check out the channel. I've got a YouTube shorts that I'll be posting in parts just for some like fun behind the scenes. But I'm also putting together a full YouTube video documenting the process as much as I can. So absolutely stay tuned for that. As for today's topic, we're going to be delving into how parenting changed my reading. And I wanted to put this out there and discuss it because there are many of us who try to maintain the hobby of reading while still trying to do our best to raise good humans, good people, and be good parents. And it's a very hard thing to balance, and it sometimes can be frustrating, or we can miss that downtime we used to have, the way we used to read, or feel like how can we incorporate reading into our children's lives, all of these things. So there's a lot of questions that are raised. There are a lot of changes that happen when you become a parent. It's not limited to just reading. It's your entire life gets changed. How you navigate your lifestyle changes. And as someone who has one child under 5, that is the context of today's video and my own experiences. So I will be sharing it from that perspective. But keeping in mind that from 0 to 5 years old, children go through incredible and very fast changes developmentally. And it can be hard to keep up as a parent sometimes. Once you figure out one phase that they go through or one stage of development, they're quickly into the next. And so we're going to delve into all of this today in terms of what my reading was like before, how it changed when I became a parent, and what are some of the things that I did to navigate those changes and try to balance everything together as best as possible. So whether you are an expecting parent, a parent with one or many children, or maybe you don't have children, but you're just curious, I would love to hear your thoughts on today's video and the topic. And if you're a parent, what was one thing that really helped you get through those younger years? And how did your own reading change? Leave your comments below. I would love to hear from you. Otherwise, let's just go ahead and dive in. So, what was my reading like before becoming a parent? The opening line of today's video, I think, sums it up accurately. I didn't realize just how much free time I had before becoming a parent, and I absolutely took it for granted. So, this is one of those things that I can look back on and see more so how far I've come in terms of time management skills, but also recognizing that I could just pick up a book whenever I wanted before having kids. If I came home from work, if my husband was playing video games, it didn't matter. I could just pick up a book and read and get lost in the book. I could read for hours without worry or care, and that's completely changed. Even if I were out driving and I wanted to put an audiobook on, I could do that. But with a little one in the back seat, and when I read, things that are usually pretty dark in terms of fantasy, not age appropriate at all for a child in the back seat, especially once they start repeating things. So that time was gone as well. As for what I read, I could pretty well read anything and it would more or less not faze me. It was pretty well okay. But when I became a parent, I became much more selective about the types of content and tropes and situations that are involved within stories, and more so because of how I reacted to those things. So let's dive into what's changed from there. So in terms of what changed, I think there's 3 main things that I want to bring up here, and they'll encompass some of the finer points that we're going to talk about later. But the first one is having no schedule. I was a creature of habit prior to being a parent. I love my routines. They helped for many reasons, not just in terms of maintaining consistency and being able to set aside an hour or two a day to read, but in terms of my own pain management as I deal with chronic pain. So that was very important. But when you become a parent, there's no schedule. And just when you think there is a schedule and you finally do have a routine down, your child grows up, they enter a new developmental stage, their needs change, and you need to reorient your entire schedule around their growing needs. And it was just a constant reorganizing and a constant level of chaos. And it felt like being on call for a job 24/7. And that just pressure of anticipation of being interrupted no matter what you're doing was constantly overhead. And so that chaos and no schedule was probably one of the biggest changes that I needed to adjust to. Second is having no energy. Sleep deprivation comes with parenting. I think that's just how it is, whether it's a newborn stage or in the 4-year-old, 5-year-old stage, because that's as far as I've gotten so far as a parent. But there are nightmares, there are interrupted sleep cycles, there are, the night feedings if you have a very young infant. And so sleep deprivation impacts a lot of that. There's not as much energy as you used to have. I struggled with the sleep deprivation because it impacted my level of chronic pain, and the mental capacity that was left at the end of the day to finally sit down and read was just gone. There was very little energy left and focus left to sit down and read, and so navigating that became really tricky as well. The last one in this category is just simply less free time. That dwindled quite a lot and more so than I was expecting. Now, mind you, this did change throughout the ages from 0 to 1, 1 to 2, and so on. As my son's routine changed, he was a big napper in his early years. And then as he napped less, I had less time to read. So navigating my reading routine around that became a constant reshifting and reorganizing and just trying to figure out how to be present, be there for my son, and then maintain my hobbies while he was asleep. As he slept less and less and went to bed later and later, became really tricky to balance. So yeah, there was just less free time. And even when you think you have free time, let's say little one is down, you're in the clear, you can sit down for an hour, chores are done, everything is off your plate. You can sit down for a little bit and read before you go to bed. And then, yeah, the mommy daddy from the bedroom calls and you're laying in that bed with your little one until they fall asleep, or you fall asleep first, depending on who wins that race. Something that also changed was my experience of stories. Before becoming a parent, like I said, certain tropes, the violence towards children and families, etc., didn't quite hit me the same way it does today. And so there are just tropes that I do not enjoy. I do not want to read. There are some ways that those scenes develop that I just cannot, I cannot anymore. Just for some examples in terms of tropes, violence towards children, I really have a hard time reading that now. Tropes of children being abandoned or orphaned. It depends on how that's handled, but it definitely hits harder now that I am a parent, and the situations that revolve around those kind of stories definitely hits harder in some cases than others for me now compared to before I became a parent. But I think the biggest one that I have a really hard time reading, apart from violence to children and families, is the pregnant lady trope. 9 times out of 10, when a pregnant lady shows up on the page, something bad is going to happen to her and her unborn child. And I'd leave the pregnant ladies alone, basically, is my take on that. And so, yeah, I have a really hard time with that trope now, too. Yeah, that's about it. Leave the pregnant ladies alone, please. Apart from that, I do think how I experience stories has changed quite a bit, especially when you get families on the scenes or, a young character growing, coming of age. There's those moments as a parent that I can now see through that lens and the eyes of a parent in those stories and those experiences, and it just hits completely different. It might make the story a bit more meaningful for me compared to before I became a parent. So there's that aspect as well. It's not all negative. There is some positive to it as well in terms of getting more out of stories as a result. and being able to see it through a different perspective. Now, as a rule of thumb, I do not read when my son is awake. That's just a rule I've learned through trial and error. I also want to be a present parent as much as possible, and we'll talk about modeling behaviors and stuff later when it comes to reading and hobbies, but basically, I've just learned to not read when my son is awake. He's a boy, and even if he's ignoring me and he's playing on his own, he has a sixth sense for when I pick up a book. As soon as I pick up a book, I'm not a sentence in and he is sitting on my lap, or I get a Hot Wheels car to the head, what have you. So I just do not read when my son is awake. And yeah, so just think of today's video and the things that we're going to be talking about under that context as well. I gave up on that part. I read when my son is asleep, and that is how I've mostly been able to balance this as much as possible. So how did I navigate all of this? Well, the biggest thing to me, and I think is the most important that anyone can recall or remember for themselves, is adaptability and grace, and valuing progress rather than perfection. Adaptability is huge. Your children, my son, they go through so many developmental changes. Their needs change as they go from 0 to 1, 1 to 2, and so on. And being able to adapt to their changes, their growth, their needs is huge. So giving yourself some grace through that adaptability and change within their schedules and needs is also really important. Give yourself some kindness. It's okay if you don't read every day. It's okay if maybe you sat down, and even if you're frustrated that you really needed that downtime for yourself, even just 10 minutes to read, it's okay. Just take a breath, give yourself some grace. Try again later, but value progress rather than perfection. So even if you only got a page in, or maybe you only got less than whatever your expectation was to read in a sitting, that's okay. It's not a race. Just value your progress rather than perfection. And don't compare yourself as a parent to what you could read before you became a parent, because that's also not doing yourself any kindness either. So adaptability, give yourself some grace, and progress, not perfectionism. Have that shift in mentality just saved my sanity in so many ways when I became a parent and I was navigating the changes with my hobby in reading. The next one is a piece of advice that I was given, and it didn't necessarily work for me. I'm going to explain. The advice was read when you can, and that is fantastic advice for some, but it might not work for everyone, like in my case. I am not the type of person who can sit down for breakfast, read a page of a book, and be interrupted and come back later. I retain nothing of what I read on that page if I was interrupted. I am the type of reader who needs long, immersed reading sessions. And so I had to learn that through trial and error, but I just started focusing on reading when I knew I could get at least a 20-minute chunk in to finish a chapter or two. That worked far better for me. So if you are the type of reader who can read whenever and read a page and retain it, fantastic, do that. If you're like me and that just does not work for you, try focusing your energy on valuing that 20-minute period to read and setting that aside for yourself later on in the day or whenever you can, rather than just struggling through the reading whenever you can and being interrupted and having to reread constantly, because that frustration through that entire process is also going to make you feel a bit demotivated, but also, like I said, frustrated with the entire experience. And maybe you then get frustrated with the book and just don't want to pick it back up again. So maintain a little bit of boundary and just see how it works for you. Try different things and see what works. Read when you can, or set some time aside to read instead. Going back to that advice of reading when you can, definitely try reading at different times of day and see how it works for you. I went through different trials and errors with this. I did the whole, wake up before your child wakes up and read for an hour before they get up for the day. Might work for some kids and parents. That's fantastic for you. It did not work for me. Unfortunately, if I woke up at, let's say 4 a.m. even to get an hour in a reading before my son woke up, he would wake up at the sound of a pin dropping. And so he would then wake up with me and he would be cranky and we'd be miserable all day. And so it just did not work. what ended up working for us was I ended up focusing on reading in the evening instead. And while he was napping during the day, I would read during naps. But I did a lot of trial and error, trying different times of the day and working around my son's routine and his needs at the time to make sure that I could somehow fit it in. Even if today looked different from the day before, that was okay. If I read at different times in each day, again, giving yourself some adaptability and grace around that is important too. But trial and error. Try reading at different times a day and seeing what works for you, and be willing to change that schedule as well. Now, before becoming a parent, I would often set myself deadlines for no other reason than to keep myself accountable. I would even join in buddy reads and read alongs, and those had deadlines, and I could meet them without issue. When I became a parent, that all went away. Commitments were not helpful when I became a parent. And the stress and the pressure that I put on myself, even to meet my own arbitrary deadlines, like I put them there just as a goalpost. And yeah, they did not end up helping me the way they used to. Before becoming a parent, they were exactly that, a goalpost, something to aim for to reach completion of a book or what have you. But when I became a parent, it did the exact opposite. Rather than push me forward and motivate me, it demotivated me. So removing that pressure of self-inflicted deadlines, of trying to finish something before a deadline, even saying no to buddy reads or read-alongs, whereas before I would have jumped on them and just joined right in. Stepping back was huge from deadlines, anything oriented to deadlines. And that helped give me some mental freedom as well, and taking the pressure and the stress off in terms of my own reading. Another thing that really helped me maintain my hobby was reading in different formats. So when I became a parent, I ended up getting an e-reader, and that was huge. So in the early years of my son's life, he was definitely one of those clingy babies when it came to nap times, but he also despised baby carriers. The slings, the little carriers that you put your babies in, he hated those. And so nap times often became me rocking him in a rocking chair, holding him, and having accessibility to an e-reader in a dark room with a backlight was huge in letting me continue to read while I rocked my little one to sleep. The same thing goes for audiobooks. Being able to listen to an audiobook where maybe both my hands are needed to hold him up, absolutely a game changer in letting me continue to enjoy stories while being otherwise preoccupied with my hands in terms of holding him, or having that e-reader handy with the backlight was huge. So trying different formats and different kinds of reading absolutely was a game changer for me. I think there was one week where he was just a huge napper, but he would not, like, it was the rocking chair for hours every day. And I think I listened to The Count of Monte Cristo in a week because he just was so clingy and I could not put him down. He would not go down. So yeah, definitely try audiobooks, ebooks. You never know what'll help, and it doesn't hurt to give it a try. One more note to that actually is the audiobooks are also great when you're doing chores. Let's say your little one is down, they are comfortable in their sleeping space, and you have the camera on them, monitor, whatever it is, pop one headphone in, listen to an audiobook as you do chores. That multitasking let me continue reading and enjoying stories as well. So audiobooks were a huge help in that regard, and it's something I still do to this day. The last thing I want to talk about here is, what if you can't read? What if just it's all too much, it's chaos, and you are struggling to even read anything, and you've just given up? If you're in that place and you're really struggling to keep that motivation to read, it's just really hard, or maybe it's just off the list for a little bit while you navigate this period of your parenting journey with your children, honestly, the biggest thing that helped, especially for myself when I was in reading slumps or life was just too chaotic to read, was staying in contact with my bookish friends. If you don't have bookish friends, absolutely take a look on the discords in the comments below. So many booktubers have discords oriented to readers just sharing their love of reading and the books that they're reading and talking about that. So take a look on Booktube, find a community you enjoy. If you have a community and friends absolutely please stay in touch with them. One of the biggest things that I think is really difficult with parenting is that sense of isolation when you're a parent, being so disconnected from the world and everything that's going on. And staying in touch with bookish friends can help not only mitigate that feeling of isolation at times, but also help you maintain your motivation, your passion, and your interest in reading. So even if you're not reading right now, you can still discuss with others what they're reading and maybe talk about books that you have already read. The next thing I wanted to talk about is modeling reading with your child. And this is a topic I've seen come up amongst readers and parents alike online many times. Basically, the biggest question is, how do I get my child interested in reading? And the answer usually comes back to model the behavior. Let your child see you reading. And I can hear you saying, Kayla, but you don't read when your child is awake. No, I do not. But if my child is playing on his own and enjoying some quiet time, I will pick up a book. And even if I don't read anything, just him seeing me holding the book is enough. He'll come over, he'll get interested, he'll ask me what I'm reading, and I'll pretend to read from it. If it's not, age appropriate content for him, I'll make up a story about what's inside the book and just get him engaged and interested and show him that this is a normal activity that we do. And another aspect of that is incorporating story time before bedtime. My son loves story time. He will read 1, 2 books and then want to stay up past his bedtime to read more. And so it was one of those things where I incorporated reading at a young age, modeling the behavior, even if I didn't read myself because of how chaotic things were. Simply holding the book and having the book around was enough to at least, I hope, give him some appreciation for reading and stories. And at the end of the day, I think that's the most important thing for me as a parent. Even if my son does not develop an interest in reading, even if he does not become an avid reader or even just reading a book a month or a year, so long as he develops an appreciation for reading, for stories, that's a win for me. I would be so thrilled. And that's all it comes down to for me. I want my son to develop an appreciation for it. Even if he doesn't become a reader, if he does, amazing. That's a whole other level. But even if he doesn't, that appreciation for the craft of it, the skill that goes into it, stories themselves, and the journey that they can take people on, absolutely, I do hope that he develops that. So just modeling the behavior, I think, was huge in getting his interest in books and stories. I want to add another part to this, actually. So modeling behavior, yes, holding the book, blah, blah, blah. But something I also do with my son, and now he does with me, is making up stories on the spot. I would just, we could be out on a walk and I would just start making up stories. They would be silly, kooky, they wouldn't make any sense, or they would, depending on how awake I was that day. But just exposure to stories and telling stories was huge, I think, because now he does it back to me. He will say, Mom, and he will go off on this story and it's broken and he's trying, you can see he's trying to put the pieces together. He laughs, he giggles, but having him tell me stories just through his imagination and off the cuff is amazing and rewarding to see as a result. So yes, model the behavior of reading, but maybe incorporate making up stories with your child as well, to give them that appreciation for the craft of it. And honestly, the giggles that come out of it, because those are so worth it. At the end of the day, parenting has not just changed how I read, but it's changed every aspect of my life for better or worse. There are moments that are great, there are moments that are really difficult, and every moment, in my opinion, has been so worth it. I am just incredibly grateful to be a mom to this amazing little boy. And even in the moments that are hard, I appreciate those moments in retrospect because I feel like they've taught me how to be a better person, be a better parent, and hopefully it helps me raise a good human as well as a result. So everyone's experience is going to be different. And for that reason, I would love to know, what has your experience been like when you became a parent and still tried to navigate maintaining your own reading through that time? Did you just not read? Did you try to maintain it? And are there any tips that you have for others watching that maybe were not covered in today's video? Leave your comments down below. I would love to hear from you. As always, thank you so much for watching and take care of yourselves.